Hello and welcome to MAGA, the podcast. Now, this is not your racist uncle's MAGA. Our MAGA stands for I'm an angry asshole, the cult of Donald Trump. And I am your host, the disgusted American. Now, the mission of our podcast is to show how Don the Con bamboozled our nation. Our goal is to help make sure the cult of MAGA goes down in flames by 2028, to stop it before MAGA becomes unstoppable and our democracy further decays into a dictatorship. If we want the cult of MAGA to end, we have to know how it began and why it spread. We have to go back to Trump 1.0, the election of 2016. In our last episode, we explored how did Trump avoid any consequences from his rivals, the moderators or the voters, after the first Republican debate. The main topic became Megyn Kelly's period. And rivals and journalists just couldn't get past his web of bullshit, distractions, and deflections. This week, we're going to take a look at the cornerstone of Trump's con on a bigger scale. We're going to look at two of his all-time favorite words, his favorite phrase, one of them at least, fake news. How did Trump make everything fake news so that nothing was fake news? Nowadays, the term fake news is everywhere. We may think, hey, it's always been around, but it hasn't. So let's take a look at the term fake news. Start with the basics. What is fake news and where did it come from? According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of fake news is false news stories, often of a sensational nature, created to be widely shared online for the purpose of generating ad revenue via web traffic or discrediting a public figure, political movement, company, etc. It started to show up around the end of the 19th century. Fake news in its modern context first started to pop up with BuzzFeed media editor Craig Silverman. He used it in a 2014 paper he did for Columbia and in a 2016 investigation for BuzzFeed, where he noticed a stream of completely made-up stories that seemed to be originating from one small Eastern European town.
And you found in some of your investigations that some of these are sites that were built in Macedonia for more of a profit motive than a political one.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, we published a story where we had found well over 100 sites focused on U.S. politics being run out of one small town in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And when we looked at the content that they were publishing, they were overwhelmingly pro-Trump. And we also saw that they were consistently publishing things that weren't true. In fact, some of their biggest hits before Election Day were things that weren't true. And when we did this calculation of the top 20 fake election hits, we did find 2 Macedonian sites there.
The young people behind all of this may not have had much interest in American politics, but there was a lot of money to be made via Facebook advertising. So they started to come up with these widely sensationalistic stories with headlines like FBI agent suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder-suicide. But these were totally bullshit made-up stories. And that began the modern and internet-friendly life of the phrase fake news. So again, misinformation, lies, and deceit, they've been around for a long time. What Silverman uncovered was that there was a unique marriage now brewing between social media platforms, advertising systems, and people who just want to make a bunch of money. So they used an election that gripped the nation and much of the world. Now, of course, Silverman wasn't the first famous person to use it. Most people don't know who he is. If you listen to Trump, he'll claim it was him, that he coined the term fake news. But, spoiler alert, he's full of shit. I know, shocking.
Keep those facts in mind when you hear Trump's new false, absurd claim that he invented the term fake news from this new interview.
The media is really the word. I think one of the greatest of all terms I've come up with is fake. I guess other people have used it perhaps over the years, but I've never noticed it. And it's a shame. And they really hurt the country because they take away the spirit of the country.
Trump did not invent the term fake news. In fact, the very first time he ever tweeted the term was after the election, all the way in December. His emphasis, of course, is on diluting this term and using it as an attack on actual journalism. It's not a sophisticated strategy, but it can work. Trump took a criticism that was sticking to him, and he threw it at other people. Republican strategist Karl Rove, known for that strategy, projecting your own weaknesses onto opponents.
Actually, on December 8th, 2016, fake news was first used by a famous person in a speech.
Let me just mention briefly one threat in particular that should concern all Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike, especially those who serve in our Congress. The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year. It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk. Lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their days, to do their jobs, contribute to their communities. It's a danger that must be addressed, and addressed quickly.
Hillary was talking about Pizzagate, which is another wild story about pizza and pedophiles that we'll dive into in a future episode. By saying those words on that day, fake news, Hillary opened up a portal to hell. And 2 days later, Trump would use the phrase for the first time. In a post on Twitter, he said that, quote, reports at CNN that I will be working on The Apprentice during my presidency, even part-time, are ridiculous and untrue. Fake news, end quote. Now, ironically, this was actually true, one of the few times Trump ever told the truth, but he didn't say why he wasn't going to be on The Apprentice. He didn't mention that he had gotten fired by NBC for being racist. So he couldn't do The Apprentice for any reason because he was no longer employed. Trump really started to lean into the phrase the following month, January 2017. A little over a week before taking office, his then press secretary, Sean Spicer, lashed out at BuzzFeed News for publishing a dossier, some of which had been corroborated. It was prepared by a former British intelligence operative. The dossier alleged ties between Trump's campaign and Russia. CNN published a verified report revealing that a synopsis of the memos had been included in materials to the president-elect and then President Barack Obama. So when CNN's Jim Acosta repeatedly tried to ask a question of the president-elect, Trump went ham on Acosta.
Since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state, Mr. President-elect,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically?
She's asking a question.
Mr.
Don't be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
You're attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
This signaled to many people who were supporting Trump that now it was okay to take this term and run with it. And that day, Facebook users interacted with stories with the term fake news nearly 3.5 million times. So the term began to spread, and this national nightmare really took hold. But the biggest problem was that everybody started using the term fake news. Within months, the sheer ubiquity of the phrase fake news made the term meaningless. Attacks had transformed fake news from a catch-all phrase to define a growing dangerous problem on social media to a weaponized term to undermine the same organizations trying to combat fake news. Now it started to mean all sorts of things: misinformation, spin, conspiracy stories, mistakes, and reporting that people just didn't like. It was just a big ball of confusion. And that, folks, was the beginning of a huge problem.
A new analysis by BuzzFeed found that false election stories from hoax sites and hyper-partisan blogs generated more engagement than content from real news sites during the last 3 months of the election. Users shared false stories like this one about Pope Francis endorsing Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton selling weapons to ISIS hundreds of thousands of times, even more than real stories. President Obama weighed in today during his trip to Germany.
If we are not serious about facts and what's true and what's not, and particularly in an age of social media where so many people are getting their information in sound bites and snippets off their phones, if we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems.
Now, of course, mainstream media couldn't resist an opportunity to discredit themselves. According to Alexios Manzarelis, the director of the Poynter Institute's International Fact-Checking Network, he said, and I quote, "We did this to ourselves, and by we, I mean the media. Right after the election, in editorials and news articles, we started calling fake news a bit of everything. We should be conscious that our industry is partly to blame for the confusion that we're at. People just use it against any information they don't like," end quote. So some experts started to pull away from using the term, but it was too little, too late. Since the phrase first appeared on his Twitter feed in December of 2016, all the way through the first week of presidential debates against Joe Biden, the president said the term fake news 1,906 times, according to transcripts and social media posts. So if he cried fake news almost 2,000 times, how many times did Trump create fake news during his first term? Let's hear what WAPO had to say about it.
But one thing I can promise you this: I will always tell you the truth.
The database started as a project for the first 100 days. It was in part an effort to not let us get distracted by the easily checked false or misleading things the president said, and we could keep our focus on writing substantive fact checks about big issues. And we could just say, oh, well, that thing the president said, we'll just put that in the database. We don't have to do a fact check on it. And then when we were done, readers begged us to keep it going. We kept it going for a year, and at that point he did 2,000. It seemed manageable, so we said we'll keep it going for the whole 4 years. And then it kind of ate up our lives because he kept saying more and more false things. The president's line got worse and worse the longer he was president. So in his first year as president, he made on average about 6 false or misleading claims a day. The second year, it was 16 claims. The third year, it was 22 claims. And then the last year, the fourth year, which of course was a pretty dramatic year, his averaged 39 claims a day. Now, 39 claims a day is a lot. It's kind of amazing. And we recorded one day in November, the day before the election, he made more than 500 false or misleading claims.
They said, how is he going to do it in Pennsylvania? He's going to win Pennsylvania except for the cheating. We figure we have to leave 5% for the cheating.
I mean, I think one reason why it just exploded so much at the end there is that he never really discarded a false claim. There were a few instances, but very few. So he did lots and lots of campaign rallies before the election, and the rallies got longer and longer because he had more and more false things to say, and he just kept building on it. There would be you could see the pattern. He'd have to go through his grievances about the Mueller investigation, then his grievances about the Ukraine impeachment, then his grievances about the coronavirus and falsely claiming everything was fine. The bottomless Pinocchio emerged out of the conundrum we faced because we generally do not like to use the word lie. I mean, lie means that you're getting in someone's head and you're saying that they actually believe what they know what they're saying is false. The problem with Trump is he lives in his own alternative reality, and so he convinces himself that his falsehoods are the truth. In order to qualify for a bottomless Pinocchio, it needs to be repeated at least 20 times.
You have to see these trade deals.
We were losing a fortune.
Hundreds of billions of dollars.
We lost
$500 billion.
300, 400, $500 billion a year.
The biggest tax cut, biggest reform of all time. It's the biggest reduction in taxes in the history of this country. It's the biggest tax cut in American history. This is the largest tax cut in the history of our country.
If you look at the bottomless Pinocchio list, it gives you a pretty good guide to the types of falsehoods that the president would say. A good portion, about 25%, are Trump falsely claiming accomplishments that he did not make, or exaggerating about his accomplishment. Nearly 500 times he said he created the best economy in U.S. history.
We also built the greatest economy in the history of the world. No, we have the greatest economy ever in the history of the world. We have the greatest economy in the history of the world. No country had anywhere near us. We had the best economy anywhere in the world.
The rally on the Mall, January 6th, I counted 107 false or misleading claims.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing.
One question people often ask, was President Trump a successful liar? I've always said that the proof would be whether or not he won re-election. Because if he won re-election, that would indicate that someone who constantly misled the American people would actually successfully hoodwink enough that he could continue as president. So he didn't win re-election, but he has managed to convince a sizable portion that this utterly absurd statement that he lost the election because of fraud is true. And it's going to take a lot of work to make sure that people understand that it wasn't true. The long-term lessons of Trump, if that kind of misbelief continues to persist, it says that it might indicate that a more skilled wannabe despot could actually succeed where Trump failed.
So the reporter of this story, when this report was actually created, this poor bastard thought it was over because Trump lost in 2020. Little did he know, the rest of us, that many lies later, 34 felony convictions later, Trump would come back and things would become infinitely worse. Okay, so he lies over 30,000 times and he cries wolf 2,000 times. So 15 times the rate he created fake news versus the times that he claimed it. A lot of times he claimed it was not actually based on validity. It was usually just stuff he didn't like that made him look like a clueless jackass, which he was and still is. But Trump loved the term so much, he even held a fake news awards announcement where, of course, he proceeded to provide a lot of fake news.
Oh, believe me, if it's off by 0.01%, it's like I end up getting Pinocchios, right? Better say think, otherwise they'll give you a Pinocchio. I don't like those. I don't like Pinocchios.
President Trump has made more than 2,000 false or misleading claims in his first year in office, and yet he almost never admits that he makes a mistake. So with that context, let's take a look at the fake news awards. At least 7 of the 11 fake news winners resulted in corrections. Of those, 2 reports prompted suspensions or resignations. 2 of the 11 were simply tweets, and in both cases resulted in immediate apologies. One was an opinion article by a columnist who almost immediately retracted his prediction. Lastly, one of the fake news awards was for the Russia investigation, which is actually still ongoing. At the Fact Checker, we don't give Pinocchios when a politician admits error. We don't try to play gotcha. And news organizations make mistakes as well. And when they make a mistake, a responsible one issues a correction. Let's put it this way. If the president admitted error as frequently as news organizations, he would end up with many fewer Pinocchios.
So while the president has used this phrase to undermine reporters holding him to power and account, actual fake news has proliferated.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton.
When Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016, there was a brief moment when the phrase fake news meant exactly that. News that wasn't true. But then, before he'd even been inaugurated, this happened.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you speak?
You are fake news.
Fake, phony, fake. It's all fake news. It's called fake news.
Fake, disgusting news.
Seemingly overnight, President Trump took the phrase fake news and co-opted it to mean news he simply didn't like, or news that he didn't want his supporters to hear. It proved to be incredibly effective.
It's a question of propaganda. You repeat things and you repeat things and you say them different ways and you say them over time, and eventually it starts to sink in, and it's the way propaganda works. And I think that's what we're seeing here.
After seeing how discrediting the media got Donald Trump into the White House, other politicians around the world saw an opportunity of their own.
We were just following the Brazil election, Bolsonaro. It was a common refrain. We see Duterte in the Philippines. We see politicians in the UK and Australia. All sorts of politicians, as a shorthand, say, don't believe that, trust me.
Studies suggest that among Trump supporters, trust in the media is at rock bottom. And towards the end of 2018, the attacks on the press took an even more aggressive turn.
Fake news is, in fact, and I hate to say this, in fact, the enemy of the people.
Birds, enemy of the people, have really taken it to a new level. And
to a dangerous level?
To a dangerous level, yes, because I think it turns people against journalism as one of the pillars of our democracy.
2 years since being elected, negative stories that might sink any other politician have simply bounced off President Trump. Yet, as November's midterm elections drew near, some wondered if crying fake news would still have the desired effect. But with the votes in and Trump declaring a success, it was very soon business as usual.
When you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead. That's enough.
As President Trump roars into the second half of his first term, there's no sign he plans to change his winning and highly divisive strategy.
You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN.
I mean, he actually lied more than 500 times one day. That is so mind-boggling to me. Even intentionally, I don't think I could lie that much. Literally everything that came out of his mouth was a lie. It's insane that this man was elected and then elected again. He lies more than most people breathe. So this barrage of using the term fake news on everything had a major impact on the electorate.
According to Pew, 62% of all adults in the U.S. get their news in some fashion from social media. And an analysis by BuzzFeed found that fake news headlines fool American adults 75% of the time.
A Gallup Night survey from November 2019 through February 2020 found that 1 in 5 Americans who identified as very conservative and 1 in 10 Republicans believed the media was trying to ruin the country. Almost 3/4 of Republicans, around 71%, had a very or somewhat unfavorable opinion of the news media, compared to 22% of Democrats and 52% of independents. Roughly 80% of respondents did believe that news was critical or very important to a democracy. So in a nutshell, we have a population that believes that news is super important, but now tends to get that news from social media, which is designed to give you what you want. We had a Facebook versus a Wikipedia problem.
One of the ways I try to get people to understand just how wrong feeds from places like Facebook are is to think about the Wikipedia. When you go to a page, you're seeing the same thing as other people. So it's one of the few things online that we at least hold in common. Now, just imagine for a second that Wikipedia said, we're going to give each person a different customized definition, and we're going to be paid by people for that. So Wikipedia would be spying on you. Wikipedia would calculate, what's the thing I can do to get this person to change a little bit on behalf of some commercial interest, right? And then it would change the entry. Can you imagine that? Well, you should be able to, because that's exactly what's happening on Facebook. It's exactly what's happening in your YouTube feed.
When you go to Google and type in climate change is, you're going to see different results depending on where you live. In certain cities, you're going to see it autocomplete with climate change is a hoax. In other cases, you're going to see climate change is causing the destruction of nature. And that's a function not of what the truth is about climate change, but about where you happen to be Googling from and the particular things that Google knows about your interests.
Even two friends who are so close to each other, who have almost the exact same set of friends, they think, I'm going to news feeds on Facebook, I'll see the exact same set of updates. But it's not like that at all. They see completely different worlds because they're based on these computers calculating what's perfect for each of them.
The way to think about it is it's 2.7 billion Truman shows. Each person has their own reality with their own facts.
Why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
Over time, you have the false sense that everyone agrees with you because everyone in your news feed sounds just like you. And that once you're in that state, it turns out you're easily manipulated. The same way you would be manipulated by a magician. Magician shows you a card trick and says, pick a card, any card. What you don't realize was that they've done a setup. So you pick the card they want you to pick. And that's how Facebook works. Facebook sits there and says, hey, you pick your friends, you pick the links that you follow. But that's all nonsense. Just like the magician, Facebook is in charge of your newsfeed.
We all simply are operating on a different set of facts. When that happens at scale, you're no longer able to reckon with or even consume information that contradicts with that worldview that you've created. That means we aren't actually being objective, constructive individuals.
And then you look over at the other side, and you start to think, how can those people be so stupid? Look at all of this information that I'm constantly seeing. How are they not seeing that same information? And the answer is, they're not seeing that same information.
What are Republicans like?
People that don't have a clue.
The Democrat Party is a crime syndicate, not a real political party.
A huge new Pew Research Center study of 10,000 American adults finds us more divided than ever, with personal and political polarization at a 20-year high.
You have more than a third of Republicans saying the Democratic Party is a threat to the nation, more than a quarter of Democrats saying the same thing about the Republicans.
So in a nutshell, this Facebook versus Wikipedia problem is one of the main reasons we are currently fucked. An abomination like the big, beautiful bill, which just passed through Congress again a few moments ago and will be on Trump's desk for signature tomorrow on July 4th, we live in a Facebook world where social media feeds us news, and I use that term in quotation marks, that just reflects what we already believe, where we have explanations for concepts that change depending on who's asking. In a society where there's no objective reality, the social fabric starts to unravel, which is exactly what's happening right now. So in this episode, we explore the question, who made fake news a thing? And the sad answer is, we all did. Trump did it by repeating the phrase over and over again. His minions did it by spreading the word, and broader culture did it by using the word so much that it lost all meaning. When fake news went from exposing fake news to labeling something fake news because we didn't like it or it made us look bad. And now we're living in an obscene clusterfuck with everybody yelling fake news about everything. So if everything is fake news, nothing is. Unfortunately, nowadays, there's no verification. There's no curiosity. It's just pick your side and let your social media feed provide you with your preferred flavor of Kool-Aid. So that's all we've got for this week. If you want to help out the channel, please subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcasting platform and tell your friends about our show so your fellow disgusted Americans can give us a listen. It also helps if you could leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform so more folks can find the show. Again, these ratings really matter. So if the show is helpful, if it's meaningful, if it is something that you find valuable, please leave us a rating. Again, it does help the show. That's all we've got for this week. Thank you all for tuning in. New episodes drop on Wednesday. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to talking to you soon. Have a great night, folks. Ciao. Bye.